Okay, so today we're going to be building a motor car crashes app using the NYC open data link here. And as you see, this is pretty much the endpoint that the data set that we're going to be using called motor vehicle collisions crashes. And I'm going to put the URL so you can hit this endpoint for testing too in the description. I'll put this in the description. So let's just give an idea of what the data is going to look like. So as it says here, it says motor vehicle crashes table contains details on the crash event. So basically, whichever crashes that have happened, car crashes that have happened in New York. And if we can take a quick look at what the data will look like here, by clicking on the data tab. And then you see we'll be able to get the date that the crash occurred, the time. We can get the borough, the zip code, the latitude, longitude. We can get the street name and a bunch of other information. You can just look through it. And then we have possible factors, so contributing factor here. And we have another issue here, another parameter there that we can get. We can get the type of vehicles. But for this, honestly, we're gonna kind of just stick to using the date, and we won't really use street that much, but we will using like the latitude and longitude. Maybe we use street name here, and we won't use parameters. It's a bunch of data. We might use the reasons too. So let's jump into SwiftUI Xcode and see if we can just build this out. So we'll start by launching Xcode. Grab it from over here. Create a new project and make it a SwiftUI project. Next. And for this one, I'm going to say NYC car crashes. And next here, create. Okay. And now I'm going to switch from using my personal phone to just using a simulator. And let's just make this a little bit larger. Let's just load so we can load our preview to see how that looks. All right, so we have the basic view right here. So basically what we want to do is basically to show a list of car crash that might have happened, like with some of the details using the NYC open data, which is a free public data set that you can use. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna make like a basic view to kind of just add some of this stuff, and then we're gonna use Swift concurrency to actually get the data. So if you watch my previous streams, you know that I love using tab view, so I add like a tab view here. And this is just gonna host our main view, and then I'll go over here and I'll create a new folder, and then this is gonna basically be called crashes view, and this is pretty much where we're gonna show the list of all those crashes. And then we'll create a new SwiftUI file. Let's just call this crashes view, and then we'll create a view model for this since we're using MVVM. And let's just call as the regular Swift file, and we'll call this crashes view model. All right. Let's jump back to our crashes view here, and we see that it's pretty much the same thing here, but we want to add this inside our tab view. So let's just copy this here. Then we're going to go back over to content view, and then in our tab view, we're just going to say crashes view. And you see it appears there. Now let's give it a tab bar, our tab item. And let's go with like some type of image at the top. And I feel like Apple has a image called car, perfect. And then we could just say here, and just put crashes. So now we have at least the first tab for the view. Let's just run it. It should be fine, but let's just run it. Like this. Now when we're running this, oh, still loading, but you're pretty much just gonna see hello world here, and you're gonna see the crashes tab right here below. A fresh run Xcode can take a couple. Load up all of that. But we'll leave this on this side for now. Is running car crashes guy. Okay. It finally loads up and we see basically what we're expecting. The hello world here, the crashes pretty much matches a preview. Well, at least the app is working. So next thing what we're going to do is, remember we want to show a list of each of these things, each crashes that might have occurred. So we're gonna go to our crashes view. And the first thing we're gonna do is I want to add like a title to the top of the screen. So I'll say add a navigation stack first and create a V stack. And then I'll add a modifier to our V stack and call this navigation title. Then here for text, I will say again crashes. And then inside here, I'm going to let's just see how this looks on our previews. Okay, so basically it's just like this. So we see crashes at the top. We basically have a basic. We basically have the UI that we want for this case. So now what we want to do is at least set up like a basic version of a list. And then in here, I'm just gonna say crash in NYC. And then you see it kind of have it listing as a list already. Let me add one more so you have a better idea. Crash in, I don't know. So we have it here where we can kind of see a list of each of these. But instead what we want to do is basically get this data from the API. So we want to get it from maximize. Let's jump back to NYC open data. And basically we want to get this data, all of this right here, back to about. We want to get all the data that we have here from our API. So we just click on actions here and then click on API. Then we scroll down. And then what we're going to do is just copy the endpoint that we have here. All right. And then let's create a new tab. And then we're going to paste it in here just so we can see what the API result actually looks like. So we see that these are the parameters that we're going to be able to get from the API. So we'll be able to get the vehicle type, each vehicle that might be in it. So vehicle type code 1 and vehicle type code 2, which means you need 2 vehicles for a crash. And then you can have the possible reason, whether it be vehicle 1's fault. Then you have the link that to it. So it says contributing factor vehicle 1, and it says aggressive driving or whatever. And then we could get the street name. We also can get the location. Not sure why they don't show this anymore. It looks like they removed the parameter for like latitude and longitude. But basically we were able to get that before. So now that we have an idea of this, let's jump back to our Xcode project. And as I said, we don't want to just be adding in the data here statically. We want to get this from the API. So now what we need to do is build out the service. So we'll go back here and we're going to create a new folder. And we're going to call this API services. API service. And then I'll create a new Swift file in here. And I will call this also API services. And then inside here, I will start by creating a protocol. This is just going to describe what our API service will provide. And it's going to help with like dependency injection so we can write unit tests later. We'll talk about that a bit later though. So now the first thing we want to do is be able to fetch the crashes, right? So it's create a function called fetch crashes. And because we're using Swift concurrency, we need to make it that this function is async. And so that's why I'm going to put that async keyword here. But I also want to make it that if, say, an error occurs or some issue occurs, throws an error. So I have to mark it with throws too. So yeah, so that will handle, just adding this keyword will handle that. But now this function, I want to make it that it can return me, I can get an array of car crash models. So basically I want to make it that I can get all of this data and use it in a way that we can use it in our SwiftUI code. So for that, I have to add a return type. So I'd have to add something like this, return, and then add some type of model here. But I haven't created this model yet, so we have to create that first. So let's jump back over here and we're going to create a folder called models. And then we're going to create a new Swift file called models as well. And then inside here, what I'm going to do is create our model or struct that we want to use to match that car crash detail. So for this now, I'm going to call this crash. Let's call it crash. and I won't add that in here. But because we want to make it that whenever, let's not do that. So now we have our struct crash model here. Now we need to basically tell it what parameters from our API do we want to use in our app. So one of the first things we'll definitely probably need is crash date. Let's grab that. So say like let crash date, and then let's make this a string because it's a string type. Let's not worry that much about the time. We could do on street name too. That might be beneficial. So let's grab that. Let's just copy this. I don't want to type this. So let on street. Yeah. Oh, let's not worry about off street, and let's not worry about this stuff where it's mentioning like injuries or so. Instead, let's go down to here and let's see if we grab these values: a contributing factor 1 and contributing factor for vehicle 1 and for. All right. So now we'll say let this contributing factor is a string as well. And I think the other one is the same thing. It just called 2. I forgot to put a let in front of this. And now let's just tab over. So we have those two. Those seem good. Don't think we'll need the ID right now, but the type of vehicle that might have caused a crash would be really good. Grab that. Say let this, make it a string. And then the second one now, let's do that 2. So let that, make it 2. And let's make a string. So these are the only parameters we're seeing for this one right here. But we know from if we jump back to the actual websites page, we see that they kind of, if we scroll down, we can see a list of like all the parameters that are available for this API. So we see a factor here called latitude, but in our response here, we're not seeing latitude. So I think what we can do, it might be that we need to add a sort. So let me just see if I can just modify the actual API from here. So let's do something like sort. Does it? No, the right way to do it. So there's a way how you can pretty much sort our JSON API. And I'll show you that in a sec. But let's see if we can at least just get this data, and then we'll modify the API to add about a sort by date or by basically ascending or descending order. Quick way to do is go to NYC open data in developers. Remember, this is a free public endpoint. And basically we're looking for the scope description. Turn. API documentation. Search query, Sakarta, guys. Okay. So this kind of describes, like, I'm gonna add this in the description too, but this kind of describes, I'm gonna zoom in. So this will describe like the parameters that we can add to modify our API run. So you see we could add some type of simple filter, or we could add their type of queries. So queries or whatever. So there's also a switch section. But basically what we want to do is make it that we can sort by the date. So we're gonna jump back to this section in 1 minute, but before we do that, let's jump back to our SwiftUI file. Now that we know that there is gonna be a parameter that we can add to do that, we're gonna jump to services, and we're gonna make it that update our services, our protocol here, and make it that it can return a function, a model. We'll call this crash, array of crashes. And now we will say class, and then say API services info, because this is the class that we're going to use to actually implement the API services, and then have it conform to it. And now it's going to complain about an error, a missing function. We're just going to add that function inside here. The next thing that we need is the actual URL for the data, and that's pretty much this up here. So we could just copy this, and then we'll jump back to our pretty much our services file, and we're gonna make it that we can access this. So we'll say private let endpoint, make it a string, make it equal to the endpoint that we just did, All right, so now that we have access to that, now we're gonna say we need to convert that to a URL. So we'll say guard URL equal URL, and we'll just set this endpoint. And else, we don't want to just return. We want to throw an error because remember we added this throws here to our function. So we want to throw a custom error though. And you see that right here it's complaining. So just to satisfy this for now, we're just gonna do a return empty array. And the reason why doing this satisfies this error is because literally our function is only asking for us to return an array of crashes. So to satisfy it, I'm just temporarily returning an empty array. All right, so now let's add our custom array, a custom error. So we'll call this crash error, API error. And then let's just give it a type of error. And then the cases we're going to use, if you watch my previous streams, I usually use this. So invalid URL, case invalid response code, this response. And then we can use a custom error here that takes in the value or the string value from the error variable that we would get inside any catch block. So right now, let's scroll up, and then we're gonna make it that instead of just returning, we're gonna throw an error. So we're gonna throw, and then we're gonna say API error, and then for this, since it's if we weren't able to create the URL here, it would be a invalid URL here. Okay. Now that we have this, what we're gonna do is next we actually start using URL session with concurrency to actually get the data. So the first thing we're gonna have to do is do a do catch because the call to URL session can fail. So we're gonna add that do catch here, and then the first thing is create the data that we could get from it, or add the variables for the data that we're gonna get from it. To try await URL session shared that data task URL. And the reason we're doing try here again is because this call here can fail. So we need to handle it, and we do that by putting in a do catch block. We're not handling the catch block now, but we will in a second. Excuse me. And then for the await section here, we have to remember this version of URL session. The function I'm calling data. You see here where it says async throws, that means I'm using the asynchronous version, pretty much with concurrency. So I'll add that back, and then I'll put URL in here, which is the URL that we made right up here. Nice. All right, so next thing we can do now is, so whenever we call this URL session, we get a tuple, and this tuple has a data type. The option click on this. You see it's a data type. We have a response type. So what we want now is basically to check the response to see if it's a valid response. So we can do that is say by doing HTTP URL response. And we're going to convert our response that currently right now is a URL response to a HTTP URL response. So say as HTTP URL response. And the reason I'm doing this is because this value right here, this type that we're converting it to, has a additional parameter on it called status code. So that's like when you say you go to a website and you see like 404 error, 500 error, those. Basically, we want to check that it's a good error. So a good error would be 200 to 299. If we were to get like a 500 or a 404, you know, that's a bad error. So we want to check for that. So we want to next check if our status code that's going to be on HTTP URL response is actually inside this area. And now we'll say else. And now, again, we don't want to just return, we want to throw an error. So we'll say API error, use our custom error and say invalid response. Check chat. Now, what we're going to do is scroll up somewhere. Now that we have checked and we know that the response is good, now we can start actually converting the data to our model, which is crashes. Because remember, so the data that we got back from after making this call is still in a format called data, which is not what we want. We want it to be crashes. There's crashes already. So to do that, we have to use a JSON decoder. So we're gonna say something like crashes equal JSON decoder dot decode, and then we have to put the data that we want to decode. So that would be data here, the same thing here, and just put it there. And we want to transform it. So decode is kind of pretty much saying you're transforming it. So we want to transform it to an array of crashes, crash models. So we'll go here, paste that, and then we'll set self here. And we're gonna get a couple errors here. So first thing is it's saying that this call can, oh yeah. So the first thing is saying that JSON decoder requires that whatever model we're trying to decode conforms to decodable. And that's just making it that, well, the JSON decoder can decode the model. So we're just gonna go back to models. And then you see here where we have our struct, to make it conform to pretty much the decodable protocol, we just hit this and say decodable. Now that we have this as decodable, if we jump back to our services view, services file, you see that that disappears, but we get a new error that says the call can throw, but it's not marked with try. So what I like to do is actually put this inside its own do catch. You don't have to do this, but I prefer doing this. And then I will add like a catch block here. And now I will know whenever we have just a specific issue with decoding, like say a value might be optional, and then the data, like say a value is optional, but we don't know, we mark it that this value will always be here. So that would pretty much flag our JSON decoder if we try to get a value that should be there and it's not there, and then we'll get an error. And then next thing I want to do once we decode it is return crashes. So this is in the success case where we're able to do all of this and we get there. So now in our catch blocks, we have to handle for those cases. So again, for errors, we want to really throw an error. We don't want to just return. We want to throw a custom error that we have. So in our catch block, we'll say throw API error. And I'm going to use the custom version. And then I'm going to pass in error, localized description. So that like basically I want to use whatever error that the system gave us in this case. And same thing for this one, I'm going to put it in our other catch block. And now we can get rid of this return here since we actually filled out everything. So we don't need to return an empty array just to satisfy anything, right? So now we don't see any errors. So it looks like our service layer is pretty much set up, right? All right, so now let's jump back to our crashes view. And again, like I was saying, is we don't want to show the data just like this. We want to show it based on an API. So we need a way how to basically use our services, but not have all that services logic inside our view. We want to keep that separate. So since we're doing MVVM, a good way to do this is do the service logic in our view model. So let's just create our view model real quick. So say crashes view model. And then we'll make it conform to observable object. And the reason we're doing that is because we want to make it that we want to listen to changes. So any change that for certain things that happen in our view model, we want our view to update and show it. I'll give you an example in a second, but just watch along for now. So now we want this, our view model, our crashes view model, to have access to our services so that we can use it and then get the array of crashes and then show it inside our view. So to do that, the first thing is we have to give the crashes view model the ability to use the services. So we're going to use dependency injection for this. So let's add, say, a new thing, and we'll add the services, and then we'll say API services. And I'm making it conform to the protocol, not the concrete class. Like here, you see, it's API services and not API services input. And the reason for that is because when we're writing unit tests, all I have to do now is when I'm writing unit tests, I would just have to make a mock version of this and just have it conform to it. Because we shouldn't be making real API calls in our unit tests. Anyway, so crashes view model. You jump back here, and then we're going to add an initializer and make it that this initializer requires API services. But we don't want to add this, like have to fill this out every time when we're initializing it. So let's give a default value, the API services info. So we're only going to use this concrete version whenever we're using it for real data. So in our testing, we wouldn't use the default value at all. So now let's create a function that's actually going to get the car crash data, crashes. And then we'll make it as async since the services function is asynchronous as well. And let's drop this in a do catch since also the services function can fail and throw an error. So I have to put in a do catch. Say let crashes equal try await. And we'll say services fetch crashes. And really now we just want to see if the data is working. Like, are we really able to decode the data? So let's just say dump for here. And dump is a basically like print, but it gives it shows the data in a console in a much better format. And then for the catch block, we'll just do printing the error. So now what we have to do to test this is make it that we can call this function and see if these values are actually there or if we're hitting the error block. Let's just set a breakpoint for now. And now we have to, basically when we want to call this is whenever the screen appears. So if we jump back to our crashes view, we have to find a way how to make it that this crashes view can use, has access to our view model. To do that, we can just go up here and we'll add a state object. And then we'll say var view model. And then we'll just say view model is equal to our crashes view. Oh no, crashes view model. And we don't have to fill out that initializer because we already gave it a default initializer. And again, we want to show this whenever the screen appears. So we're just going to add another modifier below navigation title. And we'll say task. It's going to be called task. I'll say await view model dot fetch crashes. So the task modifier that we added here basically is a modifier that gets called whenever we first screen or whenever we see the screen. The good thing about it is that it's literally designed to handle any kind of asynchronous logic that we want to run. So in this case, we're using fetch crashes, and it works. It works really fine here. There's more to it, but for now, let's just stick with this. So let's jump back to this function. I see we do have our breakpoints here, so we're gonna run the app, and then as soon as we see the screen, this function will fire, and we want to check to see if these values are there, if we were able to decode it or if we're hitting an error. So we'll hit minimize here, and then we run, and then when it runs, you'll see that we did hit an error here. So let's print this and see what error this is referring to. Scroll up. It says operation couldn't be completed. So let's see which one. Just jump to our services class, our services file, and either hitting this error right here or it's hitting this throws right here. So we're gonna run this one more time. And then let's maximize. I see it's hitting our decode error, right? So we know it's hitting, it's an issue with some property inside our crash model. So let's print out what that could be. And if we scroll up, you'll see it says blah blah blah, no value associated with the coding keys contributing factor vehicle 2. So basically it's saying that if we jump to our crashes here, or contributing factor vehicle 2, which is this right here, it's basically saying that I said this will have a string, but there's a case when we fetch data where this value was actually nil. So if we press we add like a question sign here, we make this optional, so now it will handle for any potential cases where that property could be nil. And you're gonna see this happening a lot with some of the NYC open data where there are certain properties that are just optional, and you just have to go through it sometimes, or you could just make all of them optional if you want to do that, just to make sure. So you see we get another error, and I think this is going to be the same thing where there's a value that is optional. So see, same thing, vehicle type code 2 is optional. So if we jump back to our crash model, and we're going to add a optional parameter here for vehicle type code 2, and then we rerun again. And okay, we have one more. Let's see what it says. So error. And then you see it's another parameter called on street name. So it's say some of these parameters are, they just don't have the data that you might need, and it can be very annoying. So let's run it one more time. Then get one more. So let's see which parameter is complaining about now. And that is contributing factor vehicle 1. So yeah, so this one can also be optional, and I'm guessing maybe this value can also be optional too. So basically meaning that almost all the parameters are optional, and that's because we have to make it that we can handle the data. If we run this now, I think this should be good. Okay, so that's good. So basically what happened is, they see we're not hitting this catch block anymore. We made so many of those parameters optional, and that's because the data, the API doesn't have it, so we have to handle it that way. And you see that we are able to then decode the data since we're here. And you see, if I click over, you see it's 1,000 values, which is insane. And now we're gonna dump it, basically print what we have to the screen, to the console. So let's do that. So next, you see all this data printed. It's gonna take forever. Let's see if I can just scroll up there. Yeah, so you see it's 1,000 elements, and then we have some of the data where it's on street name, Withstand, whatever, contributing factor, we have that. Contributing factor vehicle 2, we have that. Okay. So what we're gonna do now, we know that now we can decode the data and get it. So it is in the form of our crashes array model. So we can get rid of this. Let's get rid of these breakpoints first. I think we have one in our services file. For this is for decoding. Let's leave those for now. And since we don't need to print the data each time, let's get rid of that. And now what we're going to focus on, basically we want to show the data that we got from the API. Stop this. Inside our app. So to do that, we go over to crashes view, and we need a way how to get that data on a property that we can use to show inside our list here, instead of showing static data here. So to do that, we're going to create our own publish variable. Say publish var crashes. I'm going to make the array of crash. And then we're going to set it to empty for now. And the reason I'm making this a publish variable is basically because whenever any type of publish variable gets updated, the view that's using that variable automatically re-renders, like it redraws, so that it can show that new data. So the good thing about this is that like API calls usually take some time, and like usually the view is already on screen, and we want to be able to show that data as soon as we get it, even if the view was already on screen. So instead of just creating let me put that back. So instead of just creating a new variable here called crashes, we're gonna make it that the data we get from our API is placed inside our published version of crashes. Get rid of this. And now we can jump back to our view, and we are just gonna update our list to use that. So we'll get rid of this stuff right here. And now if we'll add a parameter that uses a array of crashes, and let's get access to each crash, and then we'll say in. Nice. Then let's just run that preview. We get one more error, and this is going to say that it requires, so to use say a struct or a model or array of those things inside a list, one thing we have to add is make it that whatever model we want to use like that conforms to identifiable. And the error pretty much tells us, it says requires a crash conform to identifiable. So similar how we did for decodable. So we'll jump back to models, and then same like how we did for decodable, we'll have to add a parameter called identifiable. The difference with this parameter though, it has a required variable that we have to add. So this is going to be say let UID, or it has a required field called ID. So you have to add something called ID. And for now, we're just gonna make it that it's a UUID. And if we jump back over to crashes, see that this error will eventually just disappear, just like that. So now let's see if we can just show some basic data in here. So like X like crash dot maybe try contributing factor like this. And remember, this is an optional variable, so we have to put something like this. I'm going to show you a better way, but yeah. So now you see a list of all these possible reasons for why that issue might have happened with vehicle 1. So this is the first step. Yeah, this is that one right here. So what we could do now is start building out how each row for the list is gonna look. So what we could do is let's see what other properties we have that we could build it out with. But first, let's get rid of this and let's replace it with a VStack. What we're gonna do is eventually move all the view stuff that we have here and put it in our own view. But let's just build out the UI for now. So next thing is let's look at some other parameters that we have. So we have the date, we have the on-street name, the contributing factor here, and the vehicle type. So one thing I'm thinking is we have the vehicle type. No, we have the contributing factor here. Let's see if we can also add the type of vehicle. So, and that's the type of vehicle that might have caused this issue. And that's based on the API. Based on the API in the data set on NYC open data, not me. So now we'll say crash, and then I think it's vehicle type code 1, and then we're gonna see the vehicle that was linked to this. So you see it says sedan. Sedan is linked to this issue here. Sedan's linked to a pavement slippery, some crash that might have occurred, and another sedan is linked to following too closely. But I don't want it to be in the center like it is here. So to fix that, I'm gonna say add like some alignment, and I'm gonna say dot leading. I know you're gonna notice that the UI kind of shifts to the left. All right. The next thing we could add now is basically like, you see where it says sedan. You want to know right away like which vehicle, what type of vehicle it was. So let's bold this a bit. Add bold here, just so we can see that a bit faster. It adds like a nice basic bold. And now let's look back at our model and let's see what other factors. So there are two things. So we could use this. And we use this already. There's also a vehicle too, like if there is another vehicle that kind of hit it. So we could use that. But we could also use on street name. So let's see if we could grab that too. And then I will paste this right here. So I'm gonna repurpose how the UI looks, but right now we just want to get some of this data on screen. After we can figure out if you want this to be here, this to be there, all of that. All right, so now for the next thing, we'll say crap dot street name. It's optional, so we have to do something like this. And now we see the name of the street that this occurred. So I feel like I want to just add some spacing around this. So I'll say the padding, the bottom, and feel free to like change around the UI however you want to do it. You might have a different idea of like how you expect it to be. All right. One thing I'm noticing is so some of these texts, I feel like I could make some of them smaller. Like say this could definitely be smaller. Street. Also, I don't think it needs to be in all caps. So we could just switch that to be capitalized. And now it's a little bit better. Okay, so now we see sedan. The issue linked to that sedan. And now we see the street that this might have occurred. Next thing now, so we have like a super basic view. If you want to add more stuff, you can. So let's cut this though and put it inside its own separate view. So we're just gonna grab this all this row right here, And then we're going to create a new folder. And then we're going to call this row view. That's going to be pretty much for each row inside of it, inside of that list. And we're going to create a new SwiftUI file. We're going to call this crash row view. Crash row view. And then we're just going to paste the exact same thing down here. Now it's going to complain because it doesn't know what crash is. So we're just going to have to update our view to require that. So we'll say let crash, then we'll say crash here. However, for our previews, down here it's going to complain too, saying it needs that data. So let's fill this out. And if you watch the previous stream, you know I hate filling out previews. So you want to skip forward like 5-10 seconds, you can do that. And now for crash data, we're just gonna grab this that we have here and just fill this out. Or fill this out so that like as we make more updates to the screen, we can just do it faster by just referring to the preview. So it's a hassle, but there are some benefits to having our preview ready. On street name, this. Oh, not wrong. On street name, this. Oh, let's just hide our canvas for now. All right, and then contributing factor vehicle, we'll grab this too. This one, so let's just copy that. And then the second one, it just has unspecified. It's all right, let's just copy it. And then for vehicle type, it looks like it's 2 sedan, so let's just copy that one time and then just paste it for both. And now we finish out our preview. So now let's maximize this again. And what will happen now is, one, we have to update where we're actually passing this view. So let's just jump back to Crash's view. And let's add it here. So Crash's row view. And then we're going to pass in Crash right here. It's the same row view here is the stuff that we had. But if we go to Crash row view, we can see this. So now what we're going to do is go back our canvas. Load this back. Let's go back previews. We're going to say pretty much the same thing here. Yeah, so it's pretty much have it set up like this. But one thing, as we mentioned, that we know is that it's usually 2 vehicles that are involved. So it's like what we could do is say have sedan aggressive over here, and then we could have the other necessary data on the right of the screen. So to do that, let's add it like this. So we'll say v stack, right? And then we're gonna put these 2 things, which is right here, so the type of vehicle and then the potential reason how this vehicle was involved, like that. Paste that here, and then all of this that we have here, we're gonna put this inside a H stack. So embedded in H stack, and you see it still goes back to the alignment, and that's because our nested stack now, our new V stack, is still centered. So to fix that, just add what we did before, add an alignment, make it be leading, and then further this extra part. Now it kind of looks like that. One thing that's definitely going to be an issue is the length of this right here, but I'll show you after. So inside our H stack here, the first section is this. Now we want to add a spacer, and we're going to put what we want to show on the other side. It's going to be really similar to this, so let's just copy this. We'll paste this here, but instead of being vehicle type 1, code 1, we're just going to say vehicle type 2, because we want to get the other vehicle's detail. And then for contributing factor, we'll just go with vehicle 2. Okay, so you see how long this is? It actually looks like it's specified. So what's going to happen is, say, what if like both of these are really long? So one thing that we could do is add a line limit, so to make it that this will never be long, because look at this example. Say if it's like something like this, it's gonna end up being just too much stuff. So we could limit that and just limit it to 1 line. So whatever the issue is, let's limit it to 1 line. So I'm gonna do that for both cases. So we'll say dot, add a new modifier. We'll say limit line number 1. And so it can't go past 1 line. And then we'll do the same thing too for the other factor, just to make sure it doesn't go past 1 line. Nice. And now you're seeing like these are really close to the edges of the screen, but before, when I was inside Crash's view, you can see that they're not really at the edges of the screen. And the reason for that, like see the spacing here, the reason for that is because remember, this row is inside a list, and a list kind of gives us some default padding. In our previews here, we are not showing this in a list, we're just showing this as some data on the screen. So let's modify the preview to make it add some padding, and we're just going to go to padding, go to the preview section here. Then we're going to add a padding modifier, and you see it's right here. And it also still, because we just added it to the preview, it doesn't affect our Crash's view over here. It has the same padding. It's not like we're adding in extra padding on top of the padding. Now let's scroll up here. And now we can see that basically we can see this vehicle. You can see the two vehicles that might have had an accident. They're both sedans, and you can see the possible reason that each linked up. So this one is aggressive driving versus this one unspecified. And then we see the actual location where this might have happened, or the on street name. Nice. So that's really good. So the next thing that we could add to is, and that would be really beneficial, is if we added the date, which is this right here. So to do this, we're gonna have to use a date formatter. So how we can handle this is, say, let's add some text. Let me at least show you what it's gonna look like if we just add in the date though first. So say crash the date or crash date, and you'll see it shows it like this. Maybe you could guess to see what this is. Say it looks like it's 7th September the 1st on 2021, but no one wants to do that all the time. You want to be able to just look at it and know what the date is. So I will add some padding just to push down the date, some bottom padding. Let's just make it 5. And then let's put a divider first. So I'm gonna use a divider in this one just to separate this data. All right. So now for the date, and let's change the color that we're gonna show the date. Let's make it a secondary color. Cool, that looks better. All right. So next, what we want to do is make it that we can convert this date here to a more readable version. So what we can do is basically go back our view model here, our Crash's view model, and we're gonna create a new function, and then we're gonna call it let's just convert date, and we're gonna make it like this. Let's just scroll up. So we're creating a new function, and we just call it convert date. And now if we go back to Crash row view, we'll grab the date that the API sends us, and see what we want to do is, and then we'll jump back to our Crash's view model, and I'll paste this here for now just to use it as a reference. And basically what I want to do is make it that whenever we get this date as a string here, we want to convert it to a date type that's inside Swift. So that's this version right here, this type of type, date, like that, and that's built by Swift. But to do that, one thing we're going to need first is a date formatter. So we'll say let date formatter date formatter. All right, and now we will say date formatter dot format a date format, and we're going to put what's the form. So basically we're saying what format is the string in right here, so that we can try to create so we know how to convert it to an actual date type. So if we look at this, usually what I honestly like to do is just grab this, and then I'll replace it here, and then for each letter I'm just going to change it. So for year I'm just going to be like y, and then this is month, so 9 m, and then for the actual date I'll just put D. And then for this T portion, I found out in our last stream that yeah, we do have to add this parameter, like it's a, I don't know what you call that, I think that's a quotation between the T's. And then for these parameters right here, the first one is hours, and then minutes, and seconds. And I think these are all just test it, right? And then what we're gonna do now is date formatter. And then we're going to convert. So basically we want to make it that whatever string is passed into here, we can convert it to a date. So say date formatter, and then we'll say date from, and see takes in a string. For testing, let's just pass in the string that we were working with right here. And then let's see if we can actually print, we'll do this. This returns a value. So we'll say let date equal, and use, if I option click on this, you see it's actually a date type, well, an optional one, because maybe the string that we pass in here isn't correct, so we can't convert it. Now we'll say print date. So we really just are testing this. So we're testing with one specific time, but basically what we're gonna do is make it that for each date that we get from the API, we pass in this string and then pretty much convert it and show a more readable version. But for now, let's just test this. So to test this, we can say go inside our crashes row view, or basically let's go to, yeah, so we could go inside our crashes row view here, and I'm gonna call it anywhere really, but let's call it right after task. So we could say view model that convert date. And really what we care about is this one. So let's just run this again. Oh, before we run it, let's set a breakpoint. Yeah, we already. Let's run it now. And now, if date is nil, that means date failed to convert it. And date is not nil. So we were able to convert date. You see the type here. If I should do people date, you see that we do get that printout, and it's inside the format that we want, which is a date here. So we know handling the date using this date formatter and changing the format does work. So now we can get rid of this, and we're gonna update our function to make it that we can pass in a date. So we'll say like date string, because that's how the pretty much it would give us. And we'll pass in string here, and then grab this string, and let's replace it with the test logic that we were using, and paste that here. And we can remove the reference that we have here. Now, the next thing that we need to do is make it that this function actually returns a date. And because we know for a fact that some string might be passed into this and it might not be in the right format, so that which would return a nil. So let's make it that date is of type optional. And then we'll just return back date. Cool. So we satisfy that. So before we continue, you notice that we're seeing a warning here that says publishing changes from the background threads is not allowed. Make sure to publish values from the main thread. So what this is saying is that, like, if we're making some changes, basically we're updating the UI from a background thread. So to fix this, real simple. You'll see that this is where the error pretty much is flagging. It's saying that when we call the API and we update this crashes property to show in the view, we're doing so, we're updating the UI from the background thread. So to fix that, let's just add a main actor decorator here. Okay. And now what will happen is, here and we have crashes, and now if I run this again, you notice that we don't need to update this right here, so we can get rid of this. We're not going to actually use crash date here. Let's run this again. And we do see we're able to run the app. And if we go back to our crashes view model, we don't see that warning anymore. So let's just get rid of this console. So we don't see that warning anymore. So we know we're good. The next step that we need to do though is actually use this function that we have on our view model and use it to convert this date inside our row view. So a couple ways how you could do this. So the main thing is done. So we do have the logic to do it, is this right here. But this function is inside our crashes view model. And where we need to make the change is inside our crashes row view, which doesn't have access to our view model. A couple ways that we could do this is actually giving crashes row view its own view model, and then moving that logic to this screen, or we could just pass in crashes view model to our row view. Okay, so I'm gonna go. So last time we went with the approach where for in our last stream, where we basically passed in crashes view model into our row view. So this stream we will go with giving crashes row view its own view model. So in here now, I will go here, and I will go start by clicking new file, template, and I will make this a Swift file, and I will say crash row view model. So we're making that the row has its own view model that it can use. And then we'll say class crash row view model. Same thing. Let's just make this observable. We might not need to, but yeah. And because we're gonna be using a view model to kind of handle the logic for the row view now, let's get rid of this crash property that we have here. And our view is gonna go crazy with errors because it's saying it doesn't know what crash is, and you're trying to use it. But we'll fix that in a second. So let's jump back to our crash row view model here. I'm gonna add a property called crash, which is basically what we were using there. And we're gonna also, let's add the initializer for this. And that satisfies it. Now the function, remember, so really we need to do the date formatting logic for our view, for our row view. So let's just grab the function that we created inside our crashes view model, cut this. And we're going to migrate this over to our crash row view model. I'm just pasting it here. And now what we can do is jump back to our crash row view and make it that it doesn't need a crash to create this view anymore. It needs a view model, a specific type of view model. And that's going to be view model. I don't think we need to really make this a state object, but we're going to say let view model, and we're going to say crash row view model. That's what it requires. Now this is still complaining because it's the previous definitely complain, but we'll look at that later. So now, so remember our view model now has access to our crash property. So all we have to do is all these places that we were using crash, let's just use view model dot. And we're just gonna copy that right there, plop it right there, plop it right there, put that there. Same as here. So pretty much all the places where we're just doing crash directly, we're gonna have to use a view model. That's good. And then also for a preview, we have to update that because it doesn't require a crash anymore. It requires a view model. So let's fill that out. And then it requires a crash. So we'll just paste back the crash that we just copied. And now this should be fine. So if we load previews, we'll be fine. We'll be able to see the screen. Or maybe not. Did we miss a crash here? Oh, 1 sec. I think we have to jump back to crashes view here and replace the crash that we're using here with a view model. I will say crash row view model. Crash row view model, and we'll pass in the view model that it needs and now give it the crash that it needs. And we'll still be able to see pretty much the same type of view here. Don't know why I keep saying that. Let's run it and see. Maybe there's an error that I forgot to fix. So let's run this. Oh yeah, date formatter. It doesn't know what date formatter is. So we have to add this property to our crash row view. Crash row view model. So let's just grab it from crashes view model. Grab this, cut it, and paste it here. And this works. So let's run it again. Build succeeded. And we aren't using this yet. That's why you still see it here. But we see that, well, we can still update the app. So now let's integrate it so that we're actually using our function, which is convert date here inside our view. But the first good thing is now we have a view model separate to handle row view type of work. And then we have the crashes view model that can handle that list type of work. Okay, so now let's call this function inside our SwiftUI crash row view. So for date, let's scroll down to where we're handling date. is this portion right here. And what we're going to do, we're going to take this string that we were using, and then actually we can change this up even more now. So since our crashes row view already has access to this crash, we don't need to pass in any parameter here. And we could just grab the date from the crash that was passed in. So we could just say crash date. And just like that, you could jump back over to review and we'll say if let crash date equal view model that convert date, which returns an optional value. So we're just checking that. And then we are going to, actually we could just, let's just do text. Let's just go back where we had. So we'll put like text right there, and then we're gonna use this crash date type. So this isn't a string. This is like an actual date. And what we want to do is text has a way how we can show dates inside text. So we can pass in a date type and show it inside text after that. So crash date, and then we have to put, I think it's style, and I think it's just date like this. So let's see how this looks in our previews. This new update. Okay, nice. So you see now we can see a more readable date. But one thing I'm noticing I don't really like, I feel like there's so much information on this side. So I'm gonna push this over to the right. I think you can just do like frame, and let's make this max width infinity. And then I think we can just alignment, and let's just do trailing. And you see it kind of pushes over there to the right now. I feel like this is much better experience to read. Nice. All right, so now let's run the actual full app to see everything that we have here. Okay, cool. So now when we run it, as you can see, we see the date here, but with the extra divider, it makes it confusing as to which row we're in. So we're actually gonna get rid of that. But the good thing is we see the date here. So let's just stop this for a second, maximize, and then we will pretty much go down here and get rid of this divider. And let's run it again. Okay. Okay, so now it looks way better. I feel like we can easily see what date this incident might have happened. We have more detail on it. So we see that there was one of the vehicles or a sedan. Oh yeah, let's do two different ones. So one was a sedan, and it contributing factor, it says, was following too closely. And then it was, I guess it collided with some type of pickup truck. It didn't give its reason, so it just says unspecified. And it kind of mentions where this crash might have happened, which is in Throg's Neck Bridge, on Throg's Neck Bridge or whatever. All right, so you see there's some places that we actually don't have some of the data. You see we don't have the type of vehicle here, we don't have the type of vehicle here. And that's the case where, yeah, we needed that option. We needed to make some of those parameters optional. So the API itself is missing data, which is crazy. But, you know, stuff happen. All right, so now we can click back on this. So now we can see all of this data right here. And we can see each crash that might have happened. So what we could do next is, let's work on actually trying to sort the data so that we can actually see it based on the date. This. So I'll jump back over to our API endpoints here. So we basically need to update. We want to be able to, so if you look on this, let me show you a better description. So if you look on this, you're seeing that it's showing like 2021, 2022, 2021 again. So clearly this list is not sorted. So we want to fix that and we want to sort it. So to do that, we have to modify our endpoint. And if we go to the NYC data open API, this is, I'll add this inside our description, but this is where they kind of describe how to modify. Let's stop that. Yeah, so if you go back over to NYC open data API, it will give you like orders on how to kind of sort your data, like how to add different parameters to your data so that you could help with sorting. So right now what we're looking for is a way of how to sort. And we have a section for Swift, but I don't think this have it. What we want is so you see like how you can modify it so you can specify where here. We want one, I think it's sort or order. And like you see, they have another one for limit. They have one for offset. Why do they not like make the one for sorting much? Let me see if it docs. Yeah, endpoint, simple SOQL queries. Okay, nice. So this is kind of telling us all the like extra parameters that we could add. So you see the one that we're basically looking for is $order. Column to order results on similar to order by. It looks like I can just add this $order and then I put which column I want to order it by. So let's test this out first in our browser. So let's go back to our endpoint here. And then I am going to do something like work. I think it's like you just do this. And then you say order. And then we could say equal. I already did some similar to this, people. So it's like $order. And then we'll say equal. We want to sort by our crash date. So I say $order equal crash underscore date. If I wanted to sort by something else, say crash time or whatever value you found here might be useful, I'll do something similar to that. And then I'll hit enter. And you see that like it is sorted, but it looks like it's sorted in the direction where it's like the oldest thing coming down to the newest, because you see it's starting at 2012. Fix that now. We're going to modify the URL one more time. I hope y'all can see this. And then I'll add DSC, which pretty much represents descending order. So now, as you can see here, we get the 2024, we're starting from 2024 data. So let's copy this that we have here. And we're gonna drop this inside our Swift code, in our Xcode code. And let's go to services, minimize this. And then for our endpoint that we have right here, let's modify it. So I'm gonna do it again in here so that you can kind of follow. So I need to add a new parameter, and that's gonna be order. And I want to order it by our crash date. So it's crash underscore date. But if I do it like this without specifying, let me show you like this first. So if I do it like this, it's gonna order it by crash date. So I'll minimize that and run our app again. All right, so now we do see it, but you see it's 2012. So it looks like it's sorting it, but it's sorting it in the order from oldest to newest. So basically ascending order. Fix that. Let's tap the simulator one more time. Then we're gonna scroll down, and then we're gonna just do a space and then say descending, this DSC. And now it will be sorted in descending order. So if you run it again, you should see from, you see, November 19, 2024. So this is the most recent stuff that we're seeing here now, right? So now our data is now sorted by the most recent crashes that occurred. One thing though you can see is that you see for let's say for this section, we have the one of the vehicles. If the vehicle say is a really long name, it stretches to 2 lines. Not sure I really like that, so I'm gonna limit that to 1 line. Let's jump back to our crash row view, and then we will hide our canvas just for now. And let's scroll up here where it says this, and then we're just gonna add a line limit. So that line limit modifier, and just set this to 1. And then we'll do this for the other vehicle too. So we'll say that line limit, set this to 1. And if I run this again, you'll see that it's pretty much set to 1 line. So it's pretty much set to one line. It's not extending down to the other line. Okay. Okay. Let's okay. Let's say it's a two. I'd rather have it to two than not seeing it. So let's just set the line number to two instead. Oh, I only did it for one portion. I need to do it up here too. And then we'll run. Okay, cool. That's pretty much back to it. But one thing I'm noticing is you see how these aren't even aligned? I want them to be aligned at the top. And this is because of our H stack. So you see this H stack here with this section, which is for the first vehicle, which is this area here. And then we have another section, this right here, which is for this section of vehicles right here. So we want to align them in our H stack. So we're going to add a new parameter. So let's say alignment. I'm going to make it top. So now if we run it, you'll notice that each of those are aligned exactly next to each other. Well, not next to each other, but alignment next to each other. Okay, you see right here now, it's like the top is more better aligned with it. That looks way better to me. All right, so this looks pretty good. At least you can decide to add some more parameters if you really like. You see the API here. But one thing I am noticing is that when we sort it by the most recent dates, we have more parameters here. So now we have borrow, we have zip code, we have latitude, we have longitude, we have all of this data here. And this is good. So it looks like, usually what will happen is, over the years, the API gets updated, it gets more abilities. And I think that's what might have happened here. So we could update our model now to have some of this data. And actually the ones I'm thinking about are latitude and longitude. And we can use these, and I'm thinking about these because now we can use this to show a map on our view. So let's minimize this and jump over to our model again. And then let's add two more parameters. So say latitude, which is a string for some reason. I don't know why they didn't just make this an integer or double. I double bit it. Latitude. Okay, which is also a string. Now, like we said earlier, when we were starting from the oldest data, we saw that these values weren't present. So we are definitely gonna have to make these optionals, or we're gonna see that error because we know that not every data in this API has a longitude and a latitude. So now what we can do is, now we've converted it to a string that they pretty much wanted us to do. And what we want to do now is to be able to show a map on the screen, a small map on the screen using this latitude and longitude. So let's click on crash row view here. Let's just load our preview. And more likely our preview is going to complain because we just added a new parameter for latitude and longitude. So if we scroll down here, you see it is complaining. It's saying, yo, you need these two new parameters. So I'll add them in. So latitude, and let's just put some basic right here for now. And then for longitude, let's just put some basic here too. And we're just going to actually grab some data from here so that we can load up our previews with somewhat decent. So for latitude, let's just paste this here. It was this number. Forgot to add the. All right, then let's add this one for longitude. Nice. Now what we can do, let's maximize Xcode again. Like I was saying, what I'm thinking is I want to show a map on the screen, so I could show it maybe right below the vehicles. So I basically show this not here, not in our H stack. I want to show it outside of our H stack. So let's scroll down some more. So basically right above on street name. And if you want to put it somewhere in your code while you're building, feel free to. So to do that now, we have to say map, right? We have to actually import this. You see, I'm trying to type it in. SwiftUI doesn't know what that is, so I have to import map kit. Then I will try typing in map again, and you see that we already see some information here, and it's a bunch of different parameters that we can use for map. So let's see if we can find one that takes coordinates directly. Coordinate region. This should work fine. And it's asking for a binding, but we don't need this to change. We need this to be static each time. So we're gonna say dot constant, and it's gonna require MK coordinate region. Basically, this just really just requires a latitude and a longitude. I'll pass in this type, and for coordinates for center, this takes a latitude and a longitude. And then for here right now, for this portion where it says enter the latitude version for CL coordinate 2, we'll just type in what we need to do is type in like the view model crash, and then we would use latitude here. But because latitude is optional and it's also a string when it should really be a double, we have to do something like this. So wrap this inside a double, and then we'll say view model dot crash dot latitude. It's optional, right? So it's still gonna complain to us a bit. And one thing there, you could see that this is getting really messy. It's kind of hard to follow. So if we're seeing it start to get like this, I would say honestly, let's just move this to the view model. I will do that in a second. So now you can see we're converting it to a double. We might not be able to. Let's just add a 0.0 here for now. In case where we can't do that. And now it's saying this is actually optional to latitude. Let's just put an empty string for this one. And already you can tell like this is really hard to read. So let's go here, and then we're gonna do kind of the same thing for longitude. So we're gonna replace that longitude. Let's get rid of the preview, so let's they can follow. Yeah, that looks a little bit easier to follow. Then so we have both the values that we need. So we're adding longitude here, we're adding the latitude, and then for latitudinal meters, don't exactly remember what that means. But let's just add in, let's just say 0. Let's see what that does. Add 0 here. And let's add some sizing for this map because we don't want it to be way too big. Let's just make it 200. Let's run this and see what this looks like. We're expecting to see like a mini map using that latitude and longitude data. And right here you see we do have some basic type of map right now, and we're getting the coordinates for each map using the latitude and longitude that we have from the API. The zooming in and specifics, I believe, are messing up right now because of the delta that we added in. So delta is, scroll down here, the latitudinal meters. So if you option click on this, see what it says about latitudinal meters. It says latitudinal meters, the north to south span of the region measured in meters specified as a distance from the center point to the bounds around the north, whatever. I think this should be good now. If we want to mess with it a bit more, we can. Let's look at what this warning is saying. Oh, it's just saying that there is a new version of using this instead of the one that we're using. It said this was deprecated, but we should be fine, at least for now. We also have parameters to show user location, which you don't need to do that. We could also add interaction modes, which is like the user can zoom in or zoom out. But the one thing I don't like is right now, at least, is the image isn't the map location isn't like the full width of the screen. It's really just doing the width that I added in, which is 200. So let's keep the height as 200, but make it that the width is all the way. So get rid of the width that we have here. deep height, and then we're going to add one more thing, and we're going to call this max width. I'm going to set this to infinity. And let's run this again. And that is loading very long. That okay. So now, as you can see, we have like the map actually be much wider. You can see more detail, all of that data. So that's looking really good. You can still interact with it. We can turn it off too. You see there is a, remember that interaction mode? I think we can just modify that to make it that we don't allow that interaction. There's like interaction modes, and I think there's, is there a none? There is no none. So it has had some type of interaction, so let's limit it then. Let's just make it you can only zoom. All right, cool. All right, now we have a decent enough UI. I don't like how sharp these edges is, so we can add rounded corners. So let's just add that real quick. So dot corner radius to our maps view. Maps view, I just added a new modifier called dot corner radius. And now when we run this, we will see, and you kind of see like a more rounded edges for each of the maps that we're showing. So it looks way better. Again, if you want to add like more features to your map, feel free to do that. This is just me showing you like how you can use some of these APIs to build out some basic or maybe even more complex features. All right, so cool. So I'm kind of cool with that. And I'm cool with showing this data and showing the maps. I kind of like this so far. So one thing I want to change though is, you see when we go to the screen and we're fetching the data, but it's like for a second there, the screen is just white. We want to fix that and show like a spinner. Let's do that right now. So we'll maximize our Xcode again. And then we're going to go to crashes view model. And then here we're going to say add publish bar is loading, then bool equal false. And this is the basically the property that we're going to use to check whether we should show the spinner or not. And basically when we would want to show the spinner is when the API call is making the request, right? So inside, right before we do that, right before we make our service request, I'm going to set is loading. Let me scroll up some more. Sorry about that. I'm going to, so right before we make our service request, I'm going to set our is loading to equal to true. That way we see the spinner, and then once the function is done, like we either get the data or we failed and we got an error, I want to hide the spinner. So to do that really easy, you can write defer, and then is loading equal to false. And defer basically makes it that once this function is done, what do we want to do? And what we want to do is basically call is loading and set it to false to hide the spinner. The next thing that we need to do now is go back to crashes view, to our main view, and we have to add a dot overlay. And then inside here, we're gonna basically check if view model that is loading is true. And then if it is true, we're gonna show a progress view. And like we can add like some title. So something like fetching crashes. Fetching crashes. Let's add dot dot dot. We always see dot 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 when we're when some data is loading. So anyway, so let's run this again, and while the data is loading, you see that little quick spinner. So now the user knows something is happening without, they're not just left in limbo. So already that portion looks good. The next thing we want to do is make it that, what if there's an error? What if, like we were seeing earlier, there's some data or some property that we expected to be there, but it's not. We need to show like some type of error. So how we can do that now is basically by going back to our crash is view model, and we're going to add two parameters here, two properties. It's going to be like at publish or show error alert, and then this is going to be another boolean that determines whether we should show the error alert. So bool equal false, And then we can add another property, which will be our error message that we want to show when the pop-up, when we show the pop-up. So we'll say string equals some type of empty string. So when we're using dual catch, this is one of the blessings, is like we know where the error will occur. It will always happen inside our catch block. So this is pretty much where we need to handle whether we should show or hide our error. All right, so now let's see, this is what we're gonna do. We're going to say the error message, which is a property we just made, is equal to error localized description. And again, this error type here is not something I made. It's a variable that's provided to you as long as you're inside a catch block. Now, so we basically got the error that we got from the system, and now we're setting it to the string, our error message. So yeah, so we basically got the error. We went inside localized description and are setting it to this error message string. Now, what we need to do once we set that is show the error alert. So we'll say show error alert at toggle. And now we jump back to our crashes view, and we have to add one more modifier. And again, with SwiftUI, you could kind of guess what this modifier would be, since we want to add a alert. So we'll say like that alert. And I love using this older one, which is super simple. So it is presented. We'll just say $ view model that error alert. And then for content, we'll just call alert, and we'll pass in some type of text. And then we're going to use the error message property that we created, so to fill it in here. So it's an error message here. That goes away. Okay, cool. So now we need to force the service to fail. So one way how we could do this is just change the endpoint right there. So I just remove data. And now if I run this, I don't get rid of our breakpoints. I'll get rid of the breakpoint that we had there, and I'll run back our code. Let's just do it fresh. So I'll run it back now that we've removed the breakpoint. And you see this pop-up error alert that comes up on the screen. Now the user has some basic idea of what might be happening around here. So the only thing is that this error message isn't very readable. It's not really something you could really help with. So how we can do to help fix this is scroll back up to our error enum that we created, our custom one. And we're going to give this extra parameter property called error message. Let's just say error title, because I use error messages a couple places. Error title, and then I'm gonna switch itself, and I'm gonna add I'm gonna assign a more readable error message, error title for each type of error here that we could have. So for invalid error, so on my previous tutorial stream, you're gonna know I'm just gonna be with something simple like bad URL, and then I'm gonna say for invalid response, bad response. And again, you could put these as any type of thing, error message that you want it to be. You basically want to make it that it's more readable and relatable to the user, so they understand. Assuming that they're not developers, so they should be able to do it right in a way that they could understand. And now for this portion here, where we use a custom one, we're gonna get rid of this. Let's just call this error, and then we're gonna say return. And all we're gonna say is something went wrong. And then we're going to use the error that we might have gotten here. All right, cool. Yeah. Now we're going to still leave our endpoint in the bad format so that we can test the errors. So before we do that, let's just jump back to our crashes view model. Let's just maximize this. Our crashes view model. Jump down to the initializer here. And now what we need to do is, you see this error that we as I said, that we just get from catch block, we need to convert it to our custom error. So what we're going to do now is say if let custom error equal error, and now we need to transform it or cast it to our error, our custom error. So we'll say API error, and then we're going to assign error message. Remember, error message is our published property that we made. I'm gonna say error message, and that's the message that we show in our alert. error message equal custom error dot error title, which is, remember, that's why I picked title instead of error message, so you could remember this is the variable from, so it will be one of these types of error we show. All right, so a more readable error. And then if that does happen, we just show the error alert right here. So we could actually make this a L. We could do, if you want to, you could just do this too, add like an extra else block. And then instead of using this one, we could do this and then set error and then show them the system version too. But you don't have to do this, but just another option. But really, I'm just gonna stick with this, having it as an iflet, and then I'll move our toggle here inside our if block. Now, if we run this, you will see probably something say something went wrong, or you see bad URL or something like that. So you see something went wrong. A server with the specified host name could not be found. So it's a much easier to read error message. That's that portion. So now we know our APIs. If we have an error, the user will get some type of alert that they know something's wrong. So now if we click this, first thing you'll see is that like it's just a blank screen. So this is horrible. You know what I mean? You don't want the user to just see a blank screen. So one thing we could do is say that like if crashes array is empty, we could show like some type of empty state. And what Apple gives a really good way how to do this. So we could go back to crashes view right here. And then inside this portion here where we have our actual list, we could say only show the list if view model crashes is not empty. But only show the list that we are seeing if crashes is not empty. We'll go here, switch there. And then if there's a case where crashes is empty, then let's show a content unavailable view. Right? That works. And now we can add like some title of what we want to say if like when instead of that blank white screen, some content to let the user know that like there are no code crashes, or maybe there's some internet issue that you might be having, so we couldn't fetch it. And usually the error alert will flag that, so they'll get that pop up. But now we have an extra step to help them. Okay, so for the main title, we'll say no crashes found. And then for this, I'm using regular image. What we want to use is actually a system image. Let's see if I can change this to system. Yeah. And I want to say I'm just going to use a car. And then for the description, this is where we can get in more detail on what might be happening, why the array is empty, why the crashes array is empty. So we could say, please retry and check your internet connection. Okay. So now I'm going to still leave the API bad formatted so we can see the error case. We can see a case where errors where we don't have any crashes. And why does this say focus here? And now you see this is the view that we basically see if there is a case where there are no crashes. So it's a more detailed view. The user again has more detail on what might be happening that's wrong. So this looks good. So we have a case, we have a view that will show if we can show alerts if an error occurs. And then as another backup, we can have a case where, say, if the crashes array is empty, and show them this view to give them some detail. Maybe they need to reconnect to internet, maybe their cellular data finished or whatever. So now the one thing I want to add, let's fix back our API. I think this is just data. And let's run this again. All right. And now you see that we can see our data again. This looks pretty good. The next thing that we're going to do now is it would be good if the user could pull down and like refresh and get the latest data. And with SwiftUI, again, that's mad easy. So we just have to go to crashes view, scroll down here, and we're going to add another modifier. And since we want to refresh the screen, there's a modifier called refreshable. So we're gonna add this in as refreshable. And since we want to basically get new data whenever they refresh the screen, we just have to say await view model, and we'll just fetch some crashes. Now, if I minimize this, and now if I minimize this and then run, all right. So now we got that data, and now if I pull down, you see that spinner at the top. It's just a update so that you know we're fetching some data. See, we fetch the data, we can do that. So now the user can fetch fresh data by pulling down to refresh. All right, so the last thing we're gonna kind of do is basically make it that we can push to another screen after this. It's like a more detailed screen. And we're just gonna show some of the basic information that we have over there. So let's go to crash this view. And to push to the next screen, what we are going to do is use a navigation link. This is honestly the simplest way to do this. There's a bunch of different ways where you could use a navigation destination, use a navigation path, or you could use I feel like we haven't used a sheet, so we're gonna use a sheet for this one. So in my last streams, I did use navigation link. Yeah, let's put navigation link. I could show you both, so I'll show you navigation link in this one, and then for the next stream, I'll use just sheet. So this will be your last time seeing navigation link for a while. So we'll cut this, then we'll say navigation link. I will look for the one that takes a destination and a label. And then for the label portion, we'll just paste back the row view. And now for navigation, for the where we want for destination, all right, so for label, we'll paste back the regular view. And then for destination, for now, we're just going to put some text. And then for this, I'm just going to say crash the street name maybe. So now whenever we click on a row, we'll get sent to a different screen which has some text on the screen that just says the street name that the crash occurred. Now if you click on it, you would just get sent to a screen that says Pugsley Ave, which is the same thing. If I should scroll down here, that doesn't have a street for some. But yeah, this one has Lincoln Ave. If I click on this, see that text. So basically, I don't want to just see that when we click on it. We want to see more information than that. So we're going to create another view, a new folder, and we're just going to call it crash detail view. Crash detail view. We're going to create a new SwiftUI file, and I'm calling it literally the same thing except with the spaces. Crash detail view. Right? Now, this looks good. So what this crash detail view is going to need is a crash, like that data in the model. So let's add that in. Crash. Right? And then our preview is plain. So we have to add that in. And I don't want to refill this all out. So I'm just going to grab the one that we had on row view for the model. So this one right here. So I'll grab this. Okay, let's stop this. Maximize this. And now when we go to crash detail view, we'll just give the preview that. So the beauty of this is now I can just open up the canvas, do this, stack, this empty right there for now, but let's just put text and let's do crash date. So this is going to show the regular date because I'm not doing it right here. So now we have this pretty much set up. So what we can do is start building out some of this. So one thing I want to do, like I definitely want to see where this crash happened, like maybe the address or stuff. So let's add a navigation title. Now say crash, not date, but like a street. Could be the type of vehicle. Street I feel like would be more beneficial. So now in our preview, you notice that we don't see the title actually appear. But if I should run this, click on one of these. Oh, that's not added side. Oh, yeah, so we didn't add another. Oh yeah, because we're doing this. Okay, so we actually do need to add this in. So that. So let's jump back here, and we're gonna wrap our V stack inside a navigation title. I wonder if we go back here, the one that I click on, did it have a? Oh, this isn't. I don't think this ran properly. Let's run this again. Yeah. No, let's click on one of these. Oh, I know what's happening here. I'm not actually using our crash detail view inside our crashes view. One of the struggles of coding on live stream. So now let's remove, instead, I remember we were just passing in a text here for a navigation link destination. Instead, what we're going to do here is pass in crash detail view and pass in the crash that it requires. And now when we run this and we click on a row, you'll see that it does have the title here, which is what we were expecting. But if we just rely on our previews, maximize this, we just rely on our previews. Remember, when we ran the simulator, we saw that title at the top. If we rely on our previews, we don't see it here. And the reason for that is because in this view itself, it doesn't have a navigation stack, but in the actual production code when we run it, crashes view is the parent view, has a navigation stack. So the detail view is inside that navigation stack, so that's why we see it. But for this one, it doesn't. What I'm wondering is what would happen if, say, I added a navigation stack around our in our actual preview. Don't know if this will work. I'm just freestyling right now. So I'll say do something like this. And let's reload our preview. Yeah, that worked. So we have to, if you're seeing a case like this where you want to make sure you can see the navigation title, but you're not seeing it in your preview section of a view, just wrap the preview section with a navigation stack. You don't need to go up here and then add a navigation stack on here again just for your previews. Yeah. So now that we have this, one thing, you can see that the title is way too big. So one thing we could do is change the size of the title and just go with bar display title and go with inline. Not automatic, but inline. And the title will shrink and it's more easier to read. So now we know what street this happened. All right, so next thing is, let's see if we can literally just go add like a map. And I want to do this the simplest way since we took all the time to do this. So we'll just copy maps here, all of that detail, so we don't have to write all that over again. And we're gonna plop it right here. And then instead of making the height just 200, like this 300, since we're on a detail view screen now and we have more information that we can work with. So you see it's flagging some errors here, and that's because in the previous screen we we're using a view model, but for this detail screen we just have access to crash. And you see it's complaining about it doesn't know what MK coordinate region is, it doesn't know what map is. So let's fix the map one. So we'll say import map kit, and we get rid of those map issues. Now it doesn't know what view model is, so let's just remove that portion since this view has a crash. As a crash model, it doesn't need a view model, so we'll get rid of that. And now our preview loads, and you see it pretty much is at the edges of the screen. Not sure we need the corner radius here anymore. Cool. So it kind of just stretches to the edge of the screen. The next thing I'm thinking is, what else could we add on our, this is just giving us a warning because there's a newer version of maps that we can use. You can go ahead and use it, just make sure you can pass in the latitude and coordinate, or you can stick with this way, it's up to you. Now, right below this, I'm going to show you an easier way to get rid of some of this stuff. So you see how much space is taking? Let's cut this, and I'm going to make a variable inside our view. I'm gonna call this map view, make some view, and then just paste that code right there. Then I'm gonna go up here now, and all I have to do is type in map view, and you get back the map. So it's not this whole brick of code showing all the time. So right below map view now, let's see what other data that we could show for our model. The good thing that we could is we're already showing on street name. We could show pretty much all of this stuff. So like the contributing factor for each vehicle, what was the issue, etc. So a good way to show data like this, where it's like a lot of textual data, stuff like this, is using a form. And we use this in our last simulator, in our last stream, so you might be familiar. So say form here, right? And then we'll give a section to the form, a section and a header. So where is this section header? And then for the header, let's give it a title. So we'll say text. And then what was the issue here? So let's go back to, and we have to have a section for say vehicle 1, and then contributing factor. And then so let's have a section for each vehicle, and we'll have its details under it. So for this section, let's just say vehicle 1. And then for the detail that we want in here, we could say contributing factor, vehicle type. Let's do vehicle type first, and then we will have the information for that right below. And again, some of these values are optional, so I just use that version. And then Turner, and then for this, now that we have the type here, let's put the contributing factor for that specific vehicle. So it says for vehicle 1, it was a sedan, and it was linked to its possible reason was aggressive driving. So we're going to do the same thing too for vehicle 2. So it's this to 2, this to 2, change vehicle 2 to 2. And then it says unspecified there. See what add. So let's go back to our model. Doing this, we have the latitude and longitude, which we're using there. And yeah, pretty much we could add in crash date, but it's gonna end up more than likely that what we need to do is we'll need this function again, and we would need to add it to our view here. So we might have to add another view model here. Don't really want to do that right now, so I'm gonna show you a different way. So we could basically add a extension, like a function inside our model to kind of handle that data. Or we could add a view model to this right here. Or we could pass in a view model from a different. So a bunch of different ways how we can handle it. It just depends on which way do you really want. So what I'm thinking is because crash row view model is kind of says this, it said it in its name. And I said for this one, we are gonna kind of stick to models. We're gonna actually just add a view model for crash detail view too. It's gonna be really similar logic. That's the only reason why I'm like, should I do this? I say, all right. So let's add like a view model for crash detail view, and so we can handle the date. Or we could put it on, let's put it on the model. So I showed you how to do it using the view model. I don't want to show it. Let me show you a different way now. So if we go to our crash row view, I'm going to copy this function that we have here. And then I'm going to go to our models folder. And then I'm going to create a function inside our model. I'm going to call this one convert. I could just paste this. Paste that right there, right? And we could put a date formatter in. Just say like date formatter and initialize it. The only thing is that for each of these crash models that we create, it would have its own date formatter. Not the best thing to do. So that's the only thing. So now for crash date, let's just remove that. And now what we can now do is on any crash model that we have, we can pretty much call this function and it will return a date type to us. So I showed you two approaches. So one approach, the first approach was adding in the convert date function to our crash row view model, handling it there. I know I'm showing you a different approach where you can use by pretty much handling it from our model. So if you want, it depends on which approach you decide to go with. I honestly personally prefer just using the view model to handle any type of formatting, all that stuff. That's just me. So now let's go back to our crash detail view. I know that we have a way how to show the date on the model itself. The screen doesn't now need a view model. And what I'm going to do is put a separate section at the top, because that's one of the first things I'd want to know is like when exactly. So I'll say here, I'll say section, and then I'll use header again. And then for here, I will just put date. And then for the actual section, I'm going to say text. And then I can say crash dot date. I can call the convert date function, or this returns optional. Instead of doing it like this, we'll say if let crash date equal crash dot convert date, which returns the optional value. And now we'll say text. So pretty much like we did in the previous screen. So crash date, and then give it some style, which is date. Now when this loads, if we have a valid date, it will show it like this in the screen. I feel like we can change the text for this, so let's just make this secondary. Foreground style dot secondary. So we'll keep it consistent with what we were doing in the row view. So now let's minimize this, and then we're gonna run. And it loads the data. When we click on one, we see the date here. There's going to be certain cases where the vehicle 2 might be empty. So that's one thing. So just be aware of that. I don't know if you want to set up a different way. You could do a if let to only show this if you have that data, instead of just having it be blank. Have here, you see it says open. Then let's see if we can find one. Two of them. Okay, 2 seconds. See this data here. So again, like I said, oh yeah, and then we have 2 vehicles here. If you want to make it that you only show vehicle 2 process, if there is a value for that, if it's not nil, and similar to what we did for this portion right here, instead of to make it that we only show it, we could wrap a if let around this entire section. And we could say if let we have this, show this. Yeah, that could work for us. So I kind of like how it is now. I don't feel it's an issue right now. But if you want to make that extra step to make it that you don't see this row, you could do that. But I'll just show you. So first thing is that we could say is we could wrap it around a section, or we could wrap it around here. So we could say if let vehicle type code. It's actually 2. Yeah. And we'll paste this here. So we'll only see this portion if we have it. Or we could, yeah, you know what? Let's do it even better. Let's only show this section if we have both of them. So let's only show it if we have both of them. So we'll say if let vehicle type is equal to crash type code 2. Also, if let contributing vehicle as a vehicle is equal to crash dot contributing vehicle 2. Yeah. So only if we have both of these values will we show this section now, the vehicle 2 section. So that section. And we don't need to use this optional variable, any optional ternary right here. Instead, since we already did a check for that, if let, so we could just say vehicle type, grab this, and replace it with this here. And then for vehicle 2, oh, reason, this is, instead of doing this contribute, let's change the contribute back to vehicle 2. Be consistent with that. And now we don't need to use that optional ternary process. We can just stop contributing factor right there. Now this section will only show if we have both of that type of data. Now if we click on this, you see that we don't see a section 2 here because this doesn't have a vehicle 2 section data. And if we scroll down, look for one that has both, you see that we do see the section, the vehicle 2 section here, because we have both types of data. So again, what we were able to do today is build out a NYC, build out a crashes app to see different crashes that have occurred in NYC using the NYC open data endpoint called motor vehicle collisions / crashes. And we could use the URL here and build out a SwiftUI view, this right here, that using SwiftUI, Swift Concurrency, MVVM to handle pretty much all of this. So the next step would be working on some testing to make sure that our view models are working as they should. We could also test our services too, but I'm gonna leave that one to you since I kind of helped y'all out with kind of sorting out this process. So if you like this content and you like this stream, definitely leave a like, comment, and follow or subscribe, and expect more endpoints to be tested and built with using both NYC open data and a bunch of different APIs that we use our everyday as devs, or if you're just trying to learn. But yeah, all right.